Hey everybody, I'm back again. I just felt like doing this video because I've had quite a few people bring up Zechariah 11:17 in regards to the Antichrist because people truly thought that the Antichrist was going to have a withered arm, missing, or just very tiny arm, or would be blind or missing the right eye. And so I wanted to do a deep dive, study into this verse alone and just kind of get an idea what that really means, what that could look like, and I'm seeing that it's spiritual. So we're gonna get into the layers of this verse and dive into it, and we can see here um, the different translations on the screen of Zechariah 11:17 in reference of the Antichrist or the beast of Revelation, or in this verse it talks about that person being the worthless shepherd, or the idle shepherd. So um, let's read it in the New King James. Woe to the worthless shepherd who leaves the flock. A sword shall be against his arm, and against his right eye. His arm shall be completely withered, and his right eye shall be totally blinded. So there's a couple key things that I want to really take a look at in this verse, and we're going to use a Hebrew interlinear to help us understand the words in this verse and to get a better idea of what this could really signify. And so let's kind of jump over to that. I like to use Blue Letter Bible, which gives us every word in Hebrew and English, and we can click on these things and get additional information. So the first word I want to start with is the sword, in Hebrew, hareb, and we can click on this letter, uh, Strong's concordance number here, and just take a look at what this really represents. And we can see here it's been translated as sword more times than not, and pretty much it looks like it's talking about a sword or a knife, um, some sort of cutting instrument. But really, when you read scripture and you kind of get the picture of what things really represent spiritually, the sword, from what I understand, represents two things. It would represent the word of God, but also it would represent um, judgment. He would send a sword upon his people whenever they needed judgment. So he would send um, judgment in many forms. It could be judgment to, as far as plagues, sending a sword of armies, or just death or sickness in different ways. So sword would really signify judgment. So if we go back to this interlinear, and actually I want to show this, like, this is kind of known. If you just Google search sword represents judgment, you get here. Like, the sword is also used to depict the judgment of God, both in Old and New Testament. So this is not just me coming up with it, this is understood. But going back here, so we can see that the idle shepherd that leaves the flock, judgment shall be upon his arm. So let's look at what this arm represents. So an arm, we can see it's been translated to the word here, Zorora, has been translated as arm more often than not. But we also see power and mighty and strength. And the biblical usage for this word would be, as far as a symbol of strength, maybe a political and military force or strength. So we could see that an arm could represent these things. As far as the definition here, we see figuratively power, strength, um, is what this arm represents. So if we go back to this verse, we could see that the idle shepherd that leaves the flock, judgment shall be upon his strength or his military um, or political political arm. So we could see judgment comes upon his arm or his strength or his political or military strength. And so if we look further upon his right eye, so what would the eye signify? And so let's take a look at that. Ayin, the word ayin. This is really interesting because I found a couple things. Well, most of the time, eye is translated as just the physical eye. But what was interesting to me was conceit. That four times the same word, ayin, up here, four times it was used to um, as a translation of conceit, which means to be exceedingly prideful of oneself. So if we read all of these, they all come from Proverbs. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own exceedingly pride, exceeding pride. Seest thou a man wise in his own pride? There is more hope for a fool than of him. And the sluggard is wise in his own pride than 7 men that can render a reason. And the rich man is wise in his own pride, but the poor that hath understanding searches him out. So to me, we're seeing a connection here with the eye and pride, which here in a biblical usage is pride could be a mental quality, right? Um, and or a spiritual faculty, a mental spiritual faculty. So it's this. There's this representation of mental quality or pride with the eye. And so if we go back, review this again, we can see that the idle shepherd that leaves the flock, the judgment should be upon his arm or his strength or political military power and upon his right eye. And his arm shall be clean dried up, so withered. So we're going to see that the political might is going to be withered. The military might or strength of the Antichrist is going to be lessened. It's going to be clean dried up, taken away, really. It's going to be gone. And his right eye, his shall be utterly darkened. So what does that mean? So his eye represents maybe pride. So he's going to have a super dark pride, going to have dark mental or spiritual faculty. Um, so this judgment that the Antichrist receives is going to be it's going to take away power from them, and it's going to give them this dark spiritual or mental faculty. Um, what this really this kind of reminded me of the time in um, Daniel chapter 4 with Nebuchadnezzar. Um, Let me bring this up here. Because what we can see is Nebuchadnezzar has this dream of a great tree, and it looks great and everything, but it is cut down. And he's scared, and he goes to get Daniel for an interpretation. And what we're found here is that he is going to be driven away from mankind, and his dwelling is going to be of the beasts of the field, and he's going to feed on the grass like an ox. Um, and so basically, until he acknowledges that the Most High rules over the kingdom of mankind and gives it to whom he wishes. So this is really a humbling thing. He's going to be humbled, Nebuchadnezzar, but he's going to be brought back. So what we find is Nebuchadnezzar is restored, and what we see here is at the end is that at the same time my sanity was restored, my honor and splendor returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisers and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne, and surpassing greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, for all his works are true and all his ways are just, and he is able to humble those who walk in pride. So what we find here is that Nebuchadnezzar gets judgment, and he is humbled, and it works. He responds to that judgment in a positive way, in a repentant way, where he is now humble and gives praise and exalt and glorifying the King of heaven. So, um, what's different here with Zechariah is that the worthless shepherd that deserts the flock, he's going to get the sword of judgment against his arm and his eye. And his arm, his strength, his power and might is going to be completely gone. But what I'm picking up here is that his right eye is going to be utterly blinded. He's going to be the pride is going to be blinding him. He's not that the Antichrist at the end is not going to be humbled, is going to have a dark mental faculty, is going to be prideful and not be humbled. So, that's kind of like the thing that stood out to me was Zechariah 11:17, and so um, kind of in summaries, the judgment, the sword upon the worthless shepherd received by God would weaken the strength or political power, the arm of the worthless shepherd, and it would cause a conceited or darkened mental and spiritual faculty of the worthless shepherd. So that's kind of in summary what I see, and so um, I additionally want to kind of look at some other things here that can kind of tie this together because um, in Revelation 13, let's jump to that. I wanted to point out the head wound because, and if you've watched any of my other videos, you would see that I don't think that this head wound that everyone thinks that the Antichrist is going to suffer a head wound and have this mortal death and be resurrected and brought back to life. And so I wanted to show you that that's not the case. Because this is part of the judgment that the Antichrist, the worthless shepherd, is going to receive, that judgment that takes away his power and strength, and is going to he's going to get this as if it were a mortal head wound, so or wounded to death. So um, if that's the case, how does this kind of tie in together? So if we look here on Revelation 13:13, it says, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death." So if we look at this a little more closely, actually, let's just change it to another like New King James might help us here. And so if we look at it again, "And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded." So it's as if it had been. So it's not really mortally wounded. But we can see that this deadly wound was healed. And so there's the judgment that the Antichrist receives, and then it comes back and it's healed from that and it comes back and everyone marvels at it. They're surprised and they followed him. Okay, so let's continue looking at this. Let's dig deeper into this head wound. So if we go down here to verse 14, where it talks about this wound again, this beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. We'll click on the interlinear and scroll down to that wounded by a sword. So the wound here in Greek is plege. If we click on this, and we can actually see that this word plague kind of sounds like the word plague in English. It's actually used more as plague in translation and less as wound. Um, in the Strong's definition is plague. So what I want to kind of demonstrate here is that we can see that the wound by a sword, which we had looked at earlier, but let's look at it in Greek. And so we see that, yes, in Greek it's also used like a sword, a large knife, some sort of sharp object. But we get a little better definition here in the Greek, which says judicial punishment. So the sword represents in the Greek judicial punishment or war. And so there's a little bit more of a definition here with this, but also think about the Greek statue, the one that's holding um, the scales, the balance, and the sword in its hand, and so in the Greek they would judicial punishment. There's that sword for the punishment. There's being fair and balanced, even though the scale is off balance. But so we can see if we looked at this verse a little better here, it's actually plague by the judicial punishment. The plague by judicial punishment and lived. So if you've seen any of my other videos, I think this is what is happening to Trump right now. He is going through this plague of judicial punishment. And so if we kind of tie this in here, there are some Old Testament verses about this Antichrist and New Testament verses that support the claim that sword doesn't necessarily mean a physical sharp device. And we can see that judgment, wounds to the arm and the eye and the head aren't exactly as they seem if you provide or apply a deeper spiritual meaning to them. And so breaking down Zechariah 11:17 in this manner greatly increases the understanding of what to look for when identifying a potential candidate for the Antichrist. So if we apply this to Trump, has Trump suffered a withered strength in political power? Yes. Regardless if you think Trump actually won the election and you think it was stolen, this could be a part of the judgment against the arm of Trump. God could have wanted to take the reign of power away and attempt to humble him, just like Nebuchadnezzar. However, this time, when Trump is restored to power, will he be humble? Will he exalt and glorify Yah in heaven? Time will tell. But does Trump have a conceited or prideful attitude and a darkened mental and spiritual faculty? Yes. It's gotten way worse after he lost the election. Trump is very prideful and boasts about himself all the time, in third person nonetheless. His mentality is very dark and negative, and he's nonstop. He talks about the doom and gloom of this world and basically how he's the only one that can save it. He wants you to vote for him so he can give peace on earth. Which is very interesting because, I mean, he just got a menorah award from a Jewish group that basically called him the Prince of Peace. So moving on, if is Trump experiencing a head wound or a plague of judicial punishment? Yes. He is the first president to ever be indicted criminally, not only once, but 4 times. Um, Not to mention the countless civil cases he's involved with currently and the hundreds of millions of dollars in um, and fines and fees and bonds that he's have to pay right now. Um, and so he's actually um, been sued over 4,000 times apparently, or he's had 4,000 cases against him over the last 30 years, and so it's definitely a lot of judicial punishment going on here. But so is he getting a plague of judicial punishment, and will he survive them? Um, so far, it's looking like he will come out on top. A lot of people may not see that. He has for his lifetime, like, been successful at getting out of trouble. Um, so one way or another, I think he will. Time will tell, and the next election is only months away. So if he wins that election or somehow gains power back, I believe that is the recovery from the head wound that he'll come back to power, but he'll have this darkened like state of mind, and it won't be good for everyone. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover here. Hopefully, it made sense. I'd like to hear your thoughts, comments, suggestions in the comments below. And if you've got any other verses or connections that you think go along with this, please let me know. Thanks.